Well, just when we thought that China would be cooling off their economy, they say that they're going to be keeping stimulus intact. They're going to continue easy lending as well. And we saw the bank's capital adequacy ratio hike twice this year. So there was a lot of concern that would be seeing stimulus being pulled out of that economy. 8% growth, 3% inflation rates. They do plan to see 9 million jobs added to the economy as well. So a positive round all front, but many people say we shouldn't be reading too much into what was heard over the last couple of days.
No, I think it's more about creep, and it's what I read last week in a fascinating article in Boston Globe. If you get some time, go and have a read, where they refer to these slowly changing facts that spring up on you as meso facts. And the one interesting meso fact is that there's 1% urbanization per annum. So, you know, we're not talking about a small population here. We're talking about 13.25 million people that will move from the rural areas to the urban areas. And that's bigger than the entire population of Greece. So, you know, what are we doing? Vacillating and worrying about what's happening in Greece. We should be more worried about housing and infrastructure projects in China, because to be perfectly honest, that's where it's all going to be at for the next decade or so. And I remember that interview with Mobius that Bronwyn Nielsen did last week, and I think he kind of summed it up for me, in which he said the next decade is going to belong to China, to India, and it's got a lot to do with large populations, but it's got a lot to do with a relatively low base.
Okay, looking at BHP Billiton and coke and coal contracts there, and looking at the prices that we've been seeing, China, Japan and Europe in those contracts, and we know there's been quite a lot of issues coming through on that front, demand coming through as well, and also this tied up with the iron ore contracts that we've been seeing that China has been trying to push down for quite some time. Exactly,
what a twist. 6 months ago, if you rewound and you said, okay, we're going to see these types of price hikes, everyone would have said, no, you're completely nuts. But the fact of the matter is that the steel industry's picked up quite sharply, not just in China, but also in places such as South Korea, where they're seeing increased demand. Now, let's see a fascinating number which suggested that the Chinese consumer is actually starting to come to the party, and it was a South Korea export number, would you believe? And if the South Koreans are going to be exporting anything from small motor vehicles through to flat screen TVs, I think it bodes pretty well for the steel industry. And obviously what that means, a pickup in demand, will mean for the producers like BHP, like Rio Tinto, whose proximity to that part of the world is obviously quite key. I think you'll obviously see a pickup in the contract prices, which obviously the steel guys who are still bearing the brunt, because of, obviously it's a lot more cyclical than it is with the commodity guys. I think it bodes really well for the commodity guys.
Well, speaking of steel, Arcellor Mittal is experiencing its own woes regarding contract prices, and now that the new talk is underway in terms of market-related prices, what do you think is going to play out there, Sasha? Are you concerned about them not receiving cost plus 3 anymore?
No, because we don't hold any of those shares. So I think the part that everyone misses is that they had this fantastic holiday for 9 years, or in fact prior to that. I mean, for me, the interesting part was obviously the world changes, and Kumba iron ore could now sell to bigger customers in the East. And over that time, obviously a cost plus 3% didn't suit them very well. Bearing in mind, in 2001, they probably needed Arcellor Mittal as a customer. So even if they stop that, I mean, remember, these guys have a ramp-up plan from 31 million tons per annum to nearly 50 in 3 or 4 years' time. So even if they stop that specific contract and don't sell to Arcellor Mittal, which I don't see it happening, it'll probably be a phased in. But for me, it doesn't really bother me, because we're not invested in Arcellor Mittal.